So I'm going to, I suppose, first of all, introduce the panel to you. And I'm going to move from my right further over to Greta, who's over on the other end. So on my right here is Francine Blanchet-Green. Francine is a community worker and adult educator with a particular focus on equality issues. I could say a lot more about Francine in detail about how passionate she is about certain things, but that is how she has asked me to describe her today. To Francine's right, we have Michelle Marie. Michelle is a mum, model and positive body image campaigner. She recently faced a barrage of racial tweets while at the helm of the Ireland Twitter account, and is more passionate than ever about putting an end to shame and stigma. To Michelle's right, we have Divya Ravi Kumar. Divya is a 20-year-old human nutrition and dietetics student. She participated in the WOW Festival last year by giving a talk on social media and body image, and we're very pleased to have her with us today. And finally, to the far end, I would say on the far right of the panel. She's definitely not. We have Coretti Horgan. Coretti is a lecturer in social policy at Ulster University. She's a founder member of Alliance for Choice in Northern Ireland, and she sits on the board of the Northern Ireland Anti-Poverty Network. Coretti was also a member of the first Women's Right to Choose group in Ireland, and she was the national organiser in 1981 to 83 of the campaign against putting the 8th Amendment into the Irish Constitution. So as we know, these issues have not yet been resolved. So today we're here to explore the topic of women either claiming or reclaiming social media. I'm not sure we ever owned it in the first place, so I'm not sure if reclaiming is actually the right term, but that's just my view. When I was preparing for this, I read around a bit, and I had quite a lot of discussions with people, and I suppose one of the things that I've always noticed in the last 20 years since the technology revolution, because I am pre-technology revolution, I didn't learn to use a computer until I was in my 20s. For me, the thing that the internet and virtual space has done is it has blurred the boundaries between the public and the private sphere. Women have fought for, I would say, centuries to come out of the private sphere and to avoid being put into the private sphere by society and by social structures. We might ask the questions later on around whether, virtuality and actuality is the same thing happening in those two spaces. What can our liberation through cyberspace, what can our voices through cyberspace actually change? And there are probably all sorts of things there about how, and we know there's an emerging body of inquiry into, I wouldn't even say evidence because we haven't really got our heads around it yet, but how we behave in cyberspace compared to how we behave in actuality. So on the basis of the fact that this thing that we have is part of our life world but not part of our life world at the same time, I'm going to ask the panel a number of questions. I'm going to ask them to comment, and then I'm going to throw it up into the floor, and I hope that there'll be a good healthy dialogue, and I've no idea where it's going to go, but we've got until 4:30. So,
to get there.
To get there. Or decide we need to take a break on the journey. So I suppose my first question is really getting straight to the point, and I'm going to ask each of the panel to comment as they feel like it, or they might decide that they don't want to comment. But what has social media, in your view, in your experience, done for the progression of women's choices, either in this country or globally? Anybody? Or am I going
I'm actually very passionate about what social media has managed to do for women on the island of Ireland in terms of allowing them to access some kind of control over their own bodies. Because without social media, we wouldn't be able to access the abortion pill, which I think is like what our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers dreamt of. Something, that would allow... I remember my mother talking about different noxious substances that she had heard of when she was young that would bring on your period. And in a way, that's what the abortion pill does, because it causes a very early miscarriage. Now, how have women here been able to access it? It's because of the internet. That the state is unable to do. I mean, yes, here in Northern Ireland there's been prosecutions, and yes, in the south of Ireland the state does everything it can to stop those pills arriving into the south of Ireland. But precisely because of social media, because of Twitter and Facebook and everything to do with the internet, it's impossible. So it's actually allowed women to take some control back. And it would be without the kind of dual thing of the technology, the medical technology, pharmaceutical technology, and the internet. So that we've had pharmaceutical technology since about the 70s, but it was only with the internet that it actually got into women's hands. And now, I mean, we know that a couple of thousand women every year on the island of Ireland use that technology. So yay, as far as I'm concerned.
And I'll add, is this on? I'm not sure. Yeah. That I think overall the internet has given women a voice, like a united voice. You can connect with people both nationwide and internationally. You can find people within your own community, and together you have strength in numbers and strength in your voice. You can put across what's important to you, and I think that helps women to be taken seriously and have more credibility than we're given in the offline world. So I think that's paved the way for a lot of change.
I'm just going to weigh in as well. I definitely agree with Grady and with Michelle, because I think that having social media gives us a platform to definitely be united, but also it means that if anything is, if there are any wrongdoings, we're able to actually comment on them and stand by each other, which I've definitely found I've made use of. And with things like with things like abortion, and you're able to share your own experiences as well and your own fears with other people and have them tell you that it's okay, which I think was never available before. It was never something in the last 30 years that we've really been able to do to the same strength as we can now. And I definitely feel like it means that those things, especially with the morning after pill, with abortion, with all of those things, and even with the contraceptive pill, it means that we're in a much safer environment because we have the information and the medical knowledge we need, because we can spread it between each other. So I definitely think it's great.
Francie?
I'm trying to figure out what I can add to that. I would agree with everything that's been stated. I suppose not to provide a sort of cautionary tale. Maybe I'll just be the devil's advocate for a bit of a different look at it. But equally, I think that as much as all of those things are true, and and I believe them to be absolutely true, I also think we can run the risk in the use of social media, not particularly the internet overall, but particularly with social media, where that sense that a like becomes doing. And as Katrina was talking about, and I think I probably fall into this category even more so than Katrina, of having a lifetime before the internet and before social media, and what those sort of before and after realities, and some of what I see in how social media is used. While it can be used incredibly positively and create communities, it can equally create a sense of action where no action has taken place. And in terms of activism, that sometimes concerns me. That, the pressing of a like doesn't change a thing for the most part. So I suppose a sort of cautionary tale, while all of those things in terms of organizing and coming together and being a platform for all of that, absolutely. But we need to remind ourselves that, going love doesn't really change a thing. We need to actually do something behind it. There has to be something behind it. All it is a platform for communication. And in that, it can be useful, but is not the end product, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that this is a bit of a problem for me as well. And I've been, I suppose, again in preparation for this, was doing some thinking around well, you know, when the really bad bits of the life world, when I say the life world, I mean the world outside of
Real
virtual
life,
space,
yeah.
that actuality that we're all in. You know, the really, I suppose, you know, the structural, what you might say, you know, structural misogyny that, you know, every so often you go, is it really as bad as all that? Yes, it possibly is. You know, that in itself is depressing. I mean, there are ways in which that particular, those particular forces have made their way into virtual space as well, which sort of brings me to my next question, which is probably in a broader sense, and you know, I invite you to engage with this as well, is the question of anonymity, and who does anonymity protect? And it can protect people in certain circumstances, but who is it protecting? And I suppose particularly, Michelle, with your experience, I wanted to ask the questions, you know, how do we address the issue of trolling? And that sort of stuff, again, probably to do with the fact that we're willing to do and say things in virtual space that we would never say if we were face to face with the person physically in the same room as them.
I think that's a big issue. I mean, the way the internet is at the moment, you're completely protected on there, and it's up to you to show your true self or to hide behind an anonymous figure. And for me, when I was on the Ireland Twitter account, the barrage I received from the trolls, it was, you know, intense. It was at a level that's just unprecedented. And I was getting, you know, hundreds of notifications, the majority of which were just pure racial hatred. And these people felt able to say anything they liked because they were completely unaccountable. They couldn't trace them to a person, you know, they could say whatever they liked. And it was pure vitriol. And as the week progressed, lots of people banded together and tried to, you know, block the trolls. But that doesn't stop them. It takes 5 minutes to set up an account, so they can just start again. And equally, although I said it can create good communities, it can also create negative communities. So in this situation where I was targeted, it spread like wildfire because one troll, racist troll, can see this is happening, and suddenly they're all joining in. So I really think that anonymity on the internet is at the moment a big problem and largely, you know, a really negative issue. And I was there receiving that as, you know, an adult woman, and it was hard. It's taken me a few weeks to properly recover from it. And there's young, impressionable, you know, women out there who have no protection against that, and they have no life experience to draw on. They don't necessarily have a good support network to lean on. So I think it makes it, you know, a dangerous place to be. We're having the anonymity. So I think something really needs to change on that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you think, you know, it's nearly the cyber equivalent of, you know, assaulting somebody wearing a mask.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. You can be whoever you like, say whatever you like, and like I said, you're just completely unaccountable for it. Nothing can happen. So they take no responsibility for what they're saying. I don't think they even think of the effect that it has on someone. It's just a game to them. They just want to purposely go out of their way to make themselves feel bad, and they can just go on and get on with their life again, you know, completely untouched or unaffected by it.
Greta, do you have a view on this?
And I think it's not just the anonymity. I think it's actually that people don't seem to, what you said, that people seem to think they can say stuff online that they wouldn't dream of saying to you face to face. And unfortunately, sometimes they're not anonymous people. Sometimes they're people that you actually know.
That's right.
And you're kind of going, oh my God, you just said that, you know. And I'm not going to say who it was, but somebody that I've known for years and years and years, and started at me on Facebook telling me that I was stupid and my partner must be embarrassed, I'm so stupid. And I was thinking, this is somebody called herself a feminist, and I was going, what? You know, but like that you have that, and I just do not believe that if that person had been in the room with me, that they would have said that to my face. So I do think that there is definitely a problem, and obviously it's even worse if you're anonymous, because then you can say really dreadful things. And absolutely, in terms of like racism and stuff like that, and actually misogyny generally, it does seem to be far, far worse on social media than you could ever imagine in real life. I suppose the only difference is that they can't actually beat you up, so at least that there's kind of a but that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect one physically in other ways.
Deepa?
Divya.
Divya.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with both of you guys. I think that one of the biggest issues that we have is that children are starting so young on social media. So, like you'd see a 5-year-old sitting at a table with a tablet, and they might not be on Facebook, but they could be on YouTube scrolling through comments and reading things. And, you know, it's just the fact that it's become so acceptable for people to say such horrible things. And I think that particularly with girls, it can be a bit of an issue because a girl might put up a picture after a night out and people think it's acceptable to comment saying vulgar things to her or just plain mean things or fat shaming things or skinny shaming things, and it just becomes a really hostile environment for anybody to be in. But I think it's one of those things we really have to address because from an anonymity point of view, it does definitely protect a lot of people with a lot of negativity in them. And I suppose we could definitely see it even last year with the big UCD issue where guys had a group chat going and or a group page going and they were all sending in nudes of girls, and it was horrible. It was one of the most awful things I've seen college students do in the last while, and it was something that people were laughing at. And I just think the anonymity does protect people in that way as well because it was an acceptable thing to do apparently. So I definitely think it's an issue.
I find myself in the position once again of maybe having a slightly, I wouldn't say that I disagree with anything that's being said, although I think that some of the things that are beginning to happen already, for instance, in the US around anonymity is alarming. In that already they're beginning to hack. Like what they're beginning to do is, like, say for instance, if you access a particular website and they want to be able to track anybody that accesses a website, they're sort of planting bulbs that will trail you, and essentially they'll be able to find you. And so the notion of removing all anonymity also equally concerns me. So it's like it's 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. I'm not, while absolutely seeing that there is a massive downside to the fact that people feel that they, but I'd be more on the line with what Goretti said. I don't think you need anonymity to say some of the things that people say. I also think that maybe I have led a particularly uncharmed life or something, but the thought that people don't say nasty things to your face, I'm sorry, but I've had that experience. The notion that when racists say things to you walking down the street, that they are not saying these nasty things to your face. So I don't know if I feel let's say, hardened by that. And so while I would never say, sort of suck it up and get over it, I'm not, that's not the position I'm taking. But at the same time, the reality, the real world reality of abusive realities is there. I'm not half as concerned about the online reality as I am concerned about the real world reality of that. And I think that however, I believe that one feeds the other. And part of the thing is that we haven't effectively dealt with the real world reality of that, so it has bled into the online reality of it and become acceptable, both in terms of the abuse of women online and particularly women of color. All data points at that as being the sharp end. If you're a woman and you express an opinion, forget it. You're going to get abused. You're going to get abused if you're in an open sort of forum, and even if you're in a closed one, you may get it. But if you are a woman of color, you can bank on it. It is bankable. And frankly, that's the world we live in. It's a reflection of the world we live in. So to some degree, I do see it as the reflection of the real world that we live in that has not worked on these realities. So we have to deal with it in social media. And I don't believe this started with social media. the meanness, the abject meanness that is there. I've been watching, it seems to me, in television programming, the increased meanness in general over the past 20 years of what we find entertaining. We find meanness entertaining, obviously. You could, the competitive nature of media in general that we see, projected across our screens that has been happening gradually over the past 20 years, I see this is just where it goes in terms of the internet becoming what it has become and social media. So this didn't just spring up in the box that is the internet. We've been living this increased nastiness as acceptable for a very long time. And instead of calling it or changing the channel, we've all bought into it as is entertainment. These things are popular. And so, it's been a gradual process over time of this acceptance of this reality. Now, when it becomes quite, when it happens to an individual, as what happened to you, Michelle, when, you are you and you're there and it's targeted, we suddenly see it for what it is, where it's sort of in that generalized, the one-eyed God reality. We say, well, people put themselves there, didn't they? And we've accepted that nastiness that sort of comes with it. We've accepted it in terms of celebrity over the past how many years? Well, they put themselves there, sure. If they're going to put themselves out there like that, sure, they should be willing to take whatever comes with it. We hear this said all the time. So it's not just about it. This is a social issue. It's not it being a social media issue. It is a social issue, in my opinion. Yeah.
I would just add to that with my situation, a lot of feedback I got from people that I know when I was dealing with all the racial abuse was a lot of people said to me that they didn't really think that racism was an issue anymore. It was something that just kind of simmered around in the background, but mostly, we're on top of it. It's moving forward. It's a thing of the past. Whereas this situation really showed that maybe socially we've learned that it's no longer acceptable to be openly racist, but that social media has given a voice to that again, and that is then transferring into real life as well.
Yeah.
And for me, although it was an isolated incident for me and it was extreme, for some people that is their daily existence. For some people, and a lot more than we probably like to admit, that is what they get all the time. Just, hatred just for being them. And also picking up on, women of colour. For the account that I was at the helm of, a lot of people were saying I couldn't be on the Irish account because I'm black, but there's been lots of different people of different nationalities and ethnicities that have done that before, but they've all been men. And they've been celebrated, welcomed. As soon as there was a black person, a black woman, everything changed. And it was just, I was just a sitting duck for them, and everybody who had any issues with black women and confident women, women in power, women feeling comfortable with themselves, straight away they just wanted to tear that down, squash it, suppress it. We're not comfortable with that in society at the moment.
Yeah, maybe, as you say, Francine, and what you've just alluded to as well, Michelle, that perhaps virtual reality is the real reality of what actually is on the interior of a lot of things that we'd rather not know about or rather not face up to. I'm actually going to open this up to, because I've seen a couple of hands in the audience already, so we'll start the dialogue with you now and move through. And if you could just introduce yourself when you finish.
My name is Jo Bird, and I'm a non-Zionist Jewish activist, and the last few days have been I've been defending Jackie Walker, she's a Jewish black activist woman, and subject to a lot of vitriol, not just in the last few days. She's been admitted about the trolling and the targeting she's had over 7 months at least, and how she became publicly recognised and felt to fear for her own physical and personal safety. And my question is about strategies of resistance to that. What's your experience and what can we do to resist that kind of trolling and targeting? How do we make judgment?
Could Siobhan and Kerry go to the art? Could Siobhan and Kerry go to the art?
Organise counter-attacks? When do we call in the police? Those kind of questions.
For me, because I had the first day that I was on the Twitter account, it was, non-stop barrage of hatred, and certain different tactics went through my mind. I did consider just, walking away, giving up the account, and just not dealing with it at all. But I really felt like it needed to be dealt with. But I didn't see any merit in, individually going to each troll and saying, this isn't right, this isn't okay. I did kind of one general statement to say, I'm not okay with this. And then for me, I decided to just ignore them, because especially on the online world, people are there looking for a reaction. So for me, the best way is to just ignore it. And they kept trying, more would get involved. They try and be meaner, they try and be more horrible. They really wanted a reaction. And when they couldn't get a reaction on my race, they started moving on to my size. When they moved on from my size, they tried to go on my sexuality. Like, they were just pushing, because they wanted to break me. So for me, I felt like just standing strong was the best way to deal with it. But that's not always possible in every situation. But for my situation, I felt that was the best way. That seemed to have the most powerful effect, because they didn't get the reaction or the end result that they wanted.
I have to say that heartens me, what you're saying, because that would seem to me to be the, say for instance, racism in the real world. If you buckled every time you had to experience it, you would spend your life buckled. And to some degree, you've got to be able to know yourself enough to be able to say, whatever, and move on. As you did, stand up to it, say something, but at the same time, then let it go, but not walk away, so to speak. You still gotta. My theory is, you still gotta look at me. You're gonna have to look at me over and over and over again, because I'm not going anywhere. And eventually, you'll either get fed up looking at me, or try to find a different way to get to me. And I'm really heartened to hear you say you didn't walk away, because I've been disheartened in the media, in some of those cases that have been highlighted, where women have shut down social media accounts and have walked away. Yes, it is hard to hear negative things on an ongoing basis. Nobody enjoys it. I don't think anybody enjoys it. But as in the real world reality, if you allow the bullies to win all the time, then that's what you get. You get the bullies winning. And so strategies, I find the concept difficult in relationship to social media, only to say, keep a presence. Otherwise, in withdrawing, you've achieved for them their aim.
Divya, I'm interested in, I suppose when we're grappling with this idea of, what do we do, what can we do about this type of persecution, is essentially what it is. I'm interested to hear a bit more about what happened with that group of college students.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. Basically,
how was that dealt? How did people react to it, and how were they censured?
I'm not actually sure what the conclusion was in the end. I know that UCD did definitely try and make it quite serious, because obviously it's a horrible thing to do, and it is definitely an invasion of privacy. So, but the problem was that the pictures were already out there. So for them, it's like there wasn't really, from a protection point of view, because these girls were over 18, trying to get, you can't really rein it all back. And again, I felt like it kind of all got swept under the rug a bit. And fair enough, people did acknowledge that what happened was totally wrong, but there wasn't enough emphasis put on the fact that, regardless, a lot of emphasis was put on the fact that the girls shouldn't have done it in the first place, which I think was horrible. I mean, this was a horrible thing done to someone. You trust someone with something, and they go and they share it with all of their friends or all of these random people on a Facebook group. So I think the problem was that there wasn't enough awareness raised afterwards about how to stop doing that, or how to kind of combat that. And from a protection point of view, there was definitely nothing done for the girls in that situation.
I have to say, as someone who was, student activist 20 years, more than 20 years ago, I am absolutely horrified at the notion that guys in third level education would even think that that is something that is remotely
Yeah, I thought like
doable.
maybe
I mean,
14-year-old
that
guys would be,
astounds me that
somewhat
that is what we're
immature.
actually churning out here into the graduate market. That is
Exactly.
really bloody scary, I have to say.
Definitely.
But I'm going to stop commenting now.
But again, doesn't that reflect the real world reality of sexism? And this is my point, is that until we're dealing with the things in the real world, where these things are allowed to live and given oxygen and reinforced by so many reflections, so why wouldn't it be there? Why wouldn't it be there?
Does anyone else here want to come in on this?
I just wanted to say about what Joe specifically asked about, because I do think I do think that it gets into the real world, which seems to be what's happening with Jackie Walker. Then we do have to, when we would do this with anybody, I think, that we were in solidarity with, that we let them know that they do have support, that actually, and that we will do what we can to protect them physically if they are, if they're in danger of being physically assaulted. And I agree with Francine that it's a reflection of, what's going on social media is nothing except a reflection of what happens in the physical world. And because racism and anti-Semitism is still very much alive in the real world, then of course it's going to be reflected on social media as well. But I think all you can do is just make sure that the person knows that they have a real circle of support and solidarity that will do whatever they can physically to protect them. Because I think that's important. I think in the real world it's important that people feel safe. Sorry, I'm just...
I think actually, sorry.
It's okay, I've got 3 people. Go ahead, can you just introduce yourself?
Sorry. I'll try to stand up because it's hard to hear when the acoustics are bad. I'm really working. Just in relation to 2 different elements of this, I think you're really right in teaching people how to basically not take it personally, to know that they're supported within the virtual world and everything. But with that, I think it needs to go a step further, because there's like a modern world now that used to exist, where the younger kids that you were bringing up earlier, they're the ones that have to deal with these things, and there's no, like as you were saying, there's like no limit on what they can read online and things. So that's not going to change anytime soon, right? There's nothing we can do that people continue to bombard. So I think what we need to do is, so as a society, we need to start to train younger people, at school, beyond home, on how to receive this information and basically teach them, so it's like water off a duck's back, that they know themselves well enough, that it's that the other person is the unreasonable person, that they are the bully, that they will not be rewarded for it, and when they feel like combating it with truth, that they're more prepared for the onslaught, in the sense that they won't take it to heart, but they'll use the attack as a good platform to respond reasonably and let other readers read it and learn more from your point of view. So it's not only a negative platform where somebody's, oppressing somebody by firing attacks, but it's more actually an opportunity to let other readers see more angles on it and to use it like that. So it's a positive platform because, as you say, it's a reflection of the real world. People have that in their heads, but it's being put out there. So that's going to exist, but whenever people are saying it online, people can reply to that with more reason. And then finally, in a way, that is about accountability, because nobody will reply to them in real life and put them in their place. So in real life, they'll have it in their head, they'll never say it out loud to somebody. So they'll never be told, that's not right, look at this angle. And then other people that might be vulnerable minds or easily influenced, they can look at that and learn from your response.
Thanks very much. Actually, you've touched on what's going to be my last question on the panel. So I'm not going to say park it, but that's actually where I really want us to sort of go towards the end of the discussion, is what can we take out of the room and what is it that we need to be teaching people, and particularly young people. Yourself at the back, and then Cara.
My name is
Welcome.
I'd like to ask the panel, maybe the audience, why I think people have become so emotionally invested in the media that simply doesn't reciprocate that emotional investment towards you.
Say that again, Anthony.
Why do you think people have become so emotionally invested in a system that does not reciprocate that emotional investment in you?
Yeah, so why have people become so emotionally invested in a system that doesn't reciprocate that? And it's a question of who is listening when we talk.
Because I would say that it can be reciprocated. For me, I've used Twitter for many years, and I've really battled with severe mental health, which in the real world I had no support for. And through Twitter, I had a support network, and I can say they literally saved my life many times for having people that had become friends from around the world. We'd all walked similar journeys, we all knew exactly how it felt. We could say how, truthfully, brutally, honestly, how we felt, and it wasn't judged, it wasn't mocked. So I would say people get invested because you are able to find your niche on the internet. You're able to find your community. It can give you strength in a way that the real world can't. You can be your true self in the way that you can't always in the real world. So I think a lot of people are prone to say it's just the internet. But for a lot of people, it's so much more than that. For me, for many years, the internet was my life support. And I would say that's why, for some people, it becomes so much more than just, a technological infrastructure. It's your heart and your soul.
So when you can actually access solace and solidarity from the internet that you're not getting around you in the real world, perhaps that is the reason that we crave it. Cara?
Yeah, it actually, my question relates to the last two questions, actually. It was something Michelle already touched on about support in the real world versus support online. And I just wanted to ask the panel individually if you had any suggestions or thoughts on how people who don't have a life experience or perhaps real world support behind them, how do we teach them as a society at a young age? Do you have any ideas of the tools that we can give them and how we can give them those tools to navigate both the real world and the social world? So for me, I'd say what I actually work on is increasing positive body image, and also I do a lot of advocating for self-love, because for me personally, I found that by having more self-respect, by thinking more kindly of myself, by not having such a negative mindset about who I am and what I look like, that is what's giving me the strength to feel strong in life. Self-love has become my armor, and especially as a woman, I think we're constantly reprimanded, degraded, criticized, faulted. And that starts from a really young age. So for me, I would say trying to help the younger generation to feel good in themselves, to have that strength. So as was said by yourself, so that then when you are face negativity, face difficult situations, you're much able to let that wash over you than to let it penetrate and to take it personally, because you can look within yourself and know that everything is good. Whereas for us, we tend to look outwardly for everything, and that's why it affects us so deeply. So for me personally, I think that's really the way we need to go to help people feel a lot better about themselves, so that they're more protected against the negativity in the outside world.
Divya?
Yeah, I think myself that there's not enough acknowledgement in schools of how much of an effect social media can have on kids, and there's not as much of enough of an acknowledgement of how young they start on social media. So it's not even brought up until you get into secondary school, really. Maybe in 6th class it might be discussed amongst peers, but it wouldn't be something that the teachers talk about. And from a body image point of view, that is definitely having a negative effect on kids. I mean, I know friends that have 14-year-old sisters who are going on vegan diets that they found on the internet because they want to lose weight. And it's because that's the image that they're given. They're looking at this perfect body image, and there's no discussion really in primary school about what you should look like or what you should feel like or any of those things. And it's just, you're kind of like, okay, go out, exercise, and be healthy and eat healthy, and that's it. And that's not really fair. The issue should be that the issues that are discussed in a school setting should be how you feel about how you look and being okay with how you look, because that's not even addressed really until you get to secondary school. So I think we just need to acknowledge the fact that it is a problem from a very, very young age, and even young kids in primary school are like worried about how they look.
Hi, I'm Claire. I'm just wondering, what do you guys think that the actual social media companies can do to tackle the issues? Because I'm actually following your story, Michelle, and I think Twitter has been absolutely terrible job to quieten the trolls. So what can they do?
I think it's a hard one to know what to do, because the way the internet's set up, it's very hard to police, unless there's some way of, by going by the IP address, to have, police at their door within half an hour of sending out the tweets and the message. But I feel that there is still more that could be done. During my time, Twitter made no formal statement. They didn't reach out to me to show me any support or to reassure me that they were doing all they could. Lots of people reported the tweets to Twitter, and although I think they did suspend a few accounts, again, as you said, Divya, there's a lot of just sweeping things under the carpet. They don't want to face up to the reality that this is going on online. And also, furthermore, there's a lot of hypocrisy as well. There's lots of things that they will shut down, saying this, doesn't fit our community guidelines. This shouldn't be allowed on. But it feels very personal. It's just somebody sitting there going, well, I don't want to see that, so I'm going to say that should be suspended. There doesn't seem to be any true rules and guidelines and equality at the top where it really matters. So I'm not sure what needs to be done, but something definitely needs to be done to just make it a safer place, because it is becoming extremely hostile and unequal.
I come from, I'm feeling rather old really now at this particular moment, because there are different ways to look at or to access different types of social media. Some of the systems are what I call closed systems, where you can create your own little happy bubble in them, only dealing with those people that you feel in the real world. And then other systems are quite open systems, where it's any comers, all takers welcome. I think we need to become more discernible about what systems we actually engage with and how we engage with them. It's not all good because it's there. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to do it. That you have to access it in that way and use it in that way that it was designed to. You have choices in it. And I think that I can, and I recognize that that's easier for me, someone of my age, because we go, yeah, fine, it wasn't there, a few years ago, now it is, great. Yeah, you use it to the degree to which it is useful to you, and you don't to the degree that it is not useful to you. Simply because it exists in the world doesn't mean you have to be a part of it, to be a part of the world. And sometimes, and my daughter would tell me this is a really very judgmental statement, that I think that young people, because it's been there for so much of their lives, they see it like oxygen. It's there, I have to breathe it. Well, you don't, actually. You have choices in it. Or choosing which bits, what type of social media you will engage with, or how you will engage with it or not engage with it. You actually have choices in that. Exercise them. I think that even in the closed systems, very often, I think that we can do two things. We can make them very open, and the dream of the internet, of interconnected humanity, we see is, well, in a word, bollocks. It doesn't really happen in that way, right? That's why we're here talking about this, okay? And then we have the other way where people create absolute bubbles of reinforcement to believe whatever crazy bullshit they want to believe. And we see that too. we see that that also happens, that people create bubbles that reinforce whatever it is we want to tell ourselves, right? And rarely are we living in these bubbles. As soon as somebody says something, we're not really happy. Well, that wasn't on the script that I wanted to see on this feed. So instead of seeing it as an engagement, in terms of something like Facebook, that's why that little box is there called comment. The minute you post something, you're offering yourself for comment. And this is the nature of the platform. This is the nature of the platform. You must decide to what degree you're going to engage in that, and how and what you're not going to engage in, and what you will engage in, and whether or not you want to create that bubble for yourself. And I'm curious, and I don't have an answer to it. I'm just very, very curious in some of these notions around the concept of support. Is it support? Because sometimes support tells you really hard things. Sometimes genuine support tells you stuff you don't want to hear, right? Whereas the bubble generally doesn't. The bubble only tells you all the stuff that it thinks you want to hear to keep it all nice and copacetic, right? And I worry that what we're creating are people without resilience that only want to hear positive feedback. And I'm posing it as a question. I don't have answers to this. I'm not suggesting for a second that there, that's a completely well-formulated idea in any way. But I think we run the risk of that in the creation of our bubbles. That we only want to hear the positive. We never want to hear something that we perceive as being negative.
I really decided to change my last question. Yourself.
Hi, I'm Siobhan. I use social media, particularly Facebook, for a environmental thing that I have. I use it as a way to connect people around the world and find out information I would not be able to find at all today.
Yeah.
So it's been very useful for me that way. However, I've discovered recently that Facebook itself is suggesting closed support groups to other friends and family members. So therefore, they're actually potentially revealing your private. Now, I know with the stuff on the internet, it's not necessarily private, but these things which are closed groups are supposed to be. But they're suggesting, Facebook as a company suggesting these closed groups to your friends and family, thereby potentially revealing private information and medical information like that. So I don't know if people are aware of that. I've been looking into ways of trying to reduce this. I haven't been able to find a way around. So I had to leave this group because I don't want people to know what's essentially my private information.
And I think we might be coming back around to concepts around privacy. I remember when all of this sort of, again, feeling old, has started, and discussions that would have with young people that only saw my sort of concern around, say, privacy issues, particularly initially, and say, well, that's just you stuck in some sort of, past that doesn't exist anymore. But I don't think that's true. I think we have a choice to make around whether or not we wish to make our lives so incredibly available to all sort of comers, so to speak.
Could I take the liberty of just responding on that particular issue? I think you have hit on something that's actually going to be a very, very serious clinical, ethical issue for patient confidentiality. You're right, there's a huge amount that virtual support can do, particularly for people who are self-managing conditions. There's a lot of evidence for the sort of morale and well-being that it creates. That it's additional. It's the group work phenomenon, but it's in cyberspace, so you can access it any time. That's a very, very serious issue. It does need to be discussed, absolutely, because it is going to grow as a form of actual clinical support for patients. So, absolutely, that is serious. That's a whole debate all of its own. I think.
Yes, this is something I'm going through myself. I'm very, very comfortable in this country have what I have. So I'm accessing people all around whatever it is. And the idea that I had to up and leave because this so-called close group is being revealed to people I know who I might not want them knowing that I'm part of this group because it tells you this person's part of this. And it's,
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's definitely for further discussion. I think we could probably hold one of these once a month. At least. Carolina?
Yeah, I wanted to highlight a different dimension that I haven't actually heard yet in this, that for social media, it's filling a gap because the mainstream media has become so much more right-wing. And Ron, what I found very encouraging example was around this thing that happened in the South. I don't know if you're all aware of it, where a woman and her children were murdered. And the mainstream media had a particular stand on this, how this is better of the community, and he must have been depressed. And then social media came out with her name was Clodagh. And that went viral. And that started a whole conversation, first online, but then it fed back into mainstream media. So I thought that was an incredibly positive example where social media played a role that mainstream media should have played, but didn't. That managed them to influence that. And I think that's one of the powers, positive powers of social media.
Anyone else want to comment on that? The power of social media for other voices to be heard?
I would say that in my situation, although it started off as a negative with the backlash from all the trolls, it became a really positive thing because literally the whole of Ireland stood up against it, spoke out and said, we will not accept this. This does not reflect us as a nation. It's this shouldn't be the way things are anymore, and that's going to stay with me forever. The fact that I was shown support so broadly and widely, and yeah, I mean that was just phenomenal. That it ended up being such a positive thing. And again, in the same situation with that, it just turned it around on its head. And what people will walk away from is, in this situation, my situation, remembering the positivity. And again, that for the trolls, what they set out to do completely backfired. So I think power of the people and power of positivity can really happen on social media. I think it's just potluck which way it's going to go sometimes.
Yourself?
I'd like to touch it again. This is a very adult orientated conversation, and again I'd like to bring back to the point of teenagers on social media have no frame of reference. They don't have 2020 vision. They don't have any retrospective idea of what life was before Facebook. And I personally know that a lot of they choose to use social media as their, I come from rural Ireland. A lot of children get on the bus, they go home from school, and their conversations are on the computer.
Yeah.
Their groups are on the computer, and it's a life or death situation, believe it or not, whether they're involved in a group chat. The next day, if they're kicked out of that group chat, they feel like their life is over. And if they find out there's a group chat that doesn't involve them, their whole day is ruined. So when we talk about you choose what you choose how you involve yourself in social media, sometimes it's not a choice. It is a choice for us. We're older people, we can choose how we use social media, but children and teenagers, they don't get that choice. And I'd like to just go back to as well about Michelle. Michelle's my partner. I've seen the effect that this has had. There's she was getting 500 tweets per hour. This isn't 20 tweets. And out of the 500 tweets, there was 20 good comments. 400 tweets were trolls, and trolls were tweeting onto other pages. So that was building momentum. So when there's people here that don't really know what Twitter is about, but this was barrage of absolute hatred. And when people say, toughen up, I have been with Michelle when she was talking to people, they were they actually said sticks and stones will break your bones, but names will never hurt you. When she had to delete tweets that were saying, throwing a cow in a pond isn't making it a whale, or making it a dolphin. These are absolute horrendous tweets. Now these are, when I just say that she had to delete. Now all the good things that happened from it, But if you're a teenager and you're getting the same thing, you have no you can't turn around and say, okay, this doesn't mean I'm not a fat cow. They can look at that tweet every day, every hour. They can be lying in bed reading that.
So like when we talk about social media, I was hoping that like we get around to saying that like teenagers don't have that support system. Sometimes they're not telling their parents. They're lying in bed looking at that all night on their phone. It's so accessible, you know.
It was actually, Francine, go ahead.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. But I also think that you're right because we haven't engaged. Adults in very many ways haven't engaged with how young people use social media, and we should be, and not only that, we should, like the bully in the schoolyard, that also isn't dealt with very well in many cases. We need to be dealing with it. We need to be looking at how we actually work with our young people around the usage of these platforms and what that means. And equally, we need to be looking at other things besides. I'm trying to phrase. We need to be looking at how we actually work with resilience with young people. That this is not something that's being worked with in schools or taught, or considering how much of it is necessary in the real world. We're not doing it. It's like this is something that's sidelined, you know. And so you're absolutely right in it. But I would also offer that they do have a choice, but they don't know they have a choice. If you don't know you have a choice, it feels as though you have no choice. But the truth of the matter is we do have choices, even as young people, but they don't know they have a choice. It feels as though the choice is not there because if you're not in, you're not there. You know, you're part of nothing if you're not in. That's certainly the way it feels as an adolescent. Believe it or not, I may be old, but I actually remember what it was to be an adolescent. I'll never forget, really, because a lot of it is hugely harsh, frankly. But those realities have, in many ways, have always existed. What we have is a new methodology for which that is being enacted upon us. So we even in that, we must learn ways that we can say, yeah, well, I don't actually have to, but because you don't actually have to. We're being taught that we do because of its ubiquitous nature. It's everywhere. So by it being everywhere, we're assuming that we have to be part of it at all times. When that is not true, and then we're not teaching young people really good uses of it or resilience in using it, and the choices that they actually have in it. They're not learning that part of it. Was what my thinking would be around it. But
I understand, but teenagers. I know, because I work with some teenagers. I do that. Some teenagers come home from that are living in rural Ireland. They go home and they don't get to come back to a group chat. They don't know what happened in that evening. It leaves them isolated from the situation. Where when I was a teenager, we went out and we stood in the yard. We talked, we met in the town, and we knew what was going on. But these are happening in group chats. So if you don't know what's going on, you are isolated, and you can be isolated with a few other people if you decide to be out of the group. You do have choices, but you also want to opt in.
Or quite simply, if you don't have broadband.
Yes, that's the other thing,
Let's come back to some points that are kind of relevant. Divya, I know you wanted to say something. It is a really important point.
Because if you live in Leitrim, for example, the most rural part of Ireland is Leitrim, and there is no broadband there. I have friends who live there, and they can't get.
Sure, try Rathmullen. You don't even have to go that far.
But I wanted to say, I agree with you that it's actually very, very difficult for teenagers, because it's all very well to say they don't have to join in, but if you're a teenager, you don't want to be different to everybody else, and you want to, or if you're going to, if you're going to be different, you want to make sure that everybody knows the way in which you're So whichever way you want to be part of that, the same conversation as everybody else. And I do think that parents have a role here. I have a 14-year-old grandchild, and I know my stepdaughter does go out of her way to make sure that she knows what's going on my granddaughter's phone, and is able to keep an eye on what's happening, precisely because she knows about cyberbullying and everything. And I think you're absolutely right. It's bad enough when we were growing up the bullying that went on, but at least you got some respite when you went home, and cyberbullying obviously
It's there all the time.
If you don't
Anyone has been counted with a disability of voice talk?
But I think that does go back to the whole question of, I mean,
disability of voice will begin in a couple of minutes. Go to theatre, third floor.
it is about us, I don't know, being more, I sort of think that the whole way in which social media and the internet has encouraged a lack of, it's like, so since the 1970s we've been told there's no such thing as society. There's no such thing as society. Everybody's an individual, you know, you just accept you're an island and that's it. And then some people cling to this connection and the group chats or whatever, but actually it's not a real connection. It's not a real connection at all. And I think we do need to start moving back to the idea of a collectivity and of, you know, of us. I was talking to somebody last night about that Holly's song, He Ain't Heavy, It's My Brother, He's My Brother. Do you know the song I'm talking about? Well, there's a line in it that says, you know, his welfare is my concern. And that notion that we actually should be concerned about each other's welfares, even strangers' welfare, is something that is slipping away, I think. And I think that social media has, I mean, the very fact that they can talk to you the way that they did on social media says that. So I think we need to start fighting again to sort of bring that back, to bring back the whole idea of society, and maybe actually start demanding in rural areas, not broadband for rural areas, but actually youth clubs, you know, and actually physical kind of ways of connecting, rather than sort of keep on, like saying this is the only way you can do it. But I totally agree also with all the people who said we need to have some education for parents as well as for the teenagers, because I think that there's a real big issue with parents and, you know, broader family generally not actually understanding how important it is to keep an eye out for what's going on, you know, because if Michelle can be treated that way, what happens if it's a 14-year-old that's being treated that way? Scary.
Divya.
I just think it's become way too easy to become very secretive in that way. And yeah, I completely agree with you actually with the group chat thing. I understand that you definitely do have a choice there, but it is a very hard choice to make. And in a way, if you make the choice to stay away from social media, or even just to kind of disconnect yourself from it when you get home, you are disconnecting yourself from your friends, because that is how they communicate with each other. And that could mean that you end up missing out on an outing at the weekend because they'd planned that without you. And also the fact that you can make multiple group chats means that your friends could be talking to each other or have smaller groups, and it just becomes one of those things that really, I find, has been making young people quite paranoid. So it makes them really worried that they're not being included, and it's a need to be included now, rather than before when it was something that, you know, you might get over because at least you go home and you have your family or you have the people around you that are physically there. And now it's mostly just about the people that are online. And also another point I wanted to pick up on that you mentioned earlier was that some of the stuff that people were saying to you, I read some of the tweets were just awful, but one of the things that really stuck with me was someone said, return back to your ancestral lands. And I was like, that's a despicable thing to say, but to see it written down is awful, and that you genetically aren't, you know, ever going to be part of this country essentially because you didn't inherit that. And I know myself that I've had people say things like that to me all the time in person, but they just go unnoticed because they're said in person and they're not written down, and you can't go back and look at them over and over again in the same way you could with a message that's sent to you in a group chat. And I found that mentality is definitely embedded in a lot of people, especially in Ireland. It's definitely something that people just might not necessarily accept that you're from this country because you have a different skin tone. And I think that is something that definitely needs to be dealt with. But one of the main ways to deal with that is by going to younger people and dealing with it in schools. Because if you don't address the fact that it's happening, then there's not really much point in discussing it now, really. So, yourself?
I probably hold the title of being the youngest person in the room by a few years. And I have been what people may say the victim of cyberbullying, but I've also heard the anti-bullying campaigns from the modern perspective, the turn your phone off when you get home and it's all their problem, not yours. But as someone who has been a victim of what is called cyberbullying, Ireland has the problem of that isn't actual bullying, it isn't, you being kicked in the shins with your shirt being held by the scruff.
Oh, it's not real because it's in cyberspace.
Yeah.
Very good point. Discuss.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes to the point that we still try and say, that words don't hurt you as much as physical, but they do. And as has been said several times, if you get punched in the face, it happens. It happens in that moment. You recover from it. It heals. Okay, you're still, hurt by it. When it's words, they stay with you forever. When something's on the internet, you can read it again and again. Even for me, even things I deleted, I still get some of those things going through my head because it was just so extreme. And like I said, I had resilience, I had support, I was able to step back and say, this is just people choosing me as a target. I was able to not take it personally. Yeah, I still have those words ringing in my head because they were just, such vitriol to such an extreme. So I think that, we need to stop really separating online world and real world, because in this day and age they are entwined. And if somebody has experienced something online, we need to take that as seriously as if it was happening offline, and vice versa. I think much more support needs to happen. And as you said, it's easy in theory to say switch off from it, but peer pressure is huge. And for me, I was 18 in 2000, so it was when the internet was really just starting to really get going, and a lot of my friends had internet. A lot of people were going home and chatting. Where I lived away from, I was already an outsider because I lived away from my school. We didn't have internet. My parents were very, very strict on the usage of it, and I missed out on a lot, and that was in its early days, and that was still really hard, knowing things had happened without me, and I kept, you're going into school in a blind situation, and that is really hard to take, and that's now at an extreme level in this day and age. So yeah, absolutely, what you're saying, I think, we shouldn't just be dismissing the internet as, just the internet, because it's much more than that.
No, but I would like to see people engaging, certainly in the Republic, around what is actually hate. Because the hate legislation, most certainly in the Republic, is diabolical to the point of being non-existent. So here we have a situation when we're talking about, online hate, when real world hate is not being dealt with in any significant way. And until you can deal with the real world reality of what hate actually does, no one's certainly going to focus on it on an online way. If we're treating one as the other, then in truth what we're doing is nothing in either case, because we're not doing anything about real world hate. Certainly in the Republic of Ireland. The hate legislation in Northern Ireland is better, significantly better than the hate legislation in the Republic. So nothing's being done about that. It's like there's a silence on hate legislation in the Republic. While we're talking about things happening in the online world, but we're not doing anything to change the hate legislation in the country. Well, that to me would be the place to start, because until you can deal with that, it's not going to bleed into the online world. So we need to look at hate in all its forms, and yes, treat them as the same, but do something about them. So we need to act. It's no good whether or not we're deleting posts or deciding to, we can just turn that off. Well, in the real world, you can't delete the racism that just hit you in the head. You can't, turn off the device, because the device is that person standing over there looking at you, saying the nasty stuff. You can't turn it off. So that's where it needs to be dealt with. If we want to treat it the same, then we need to deal with the real world hate.
I think there is something that I'm going to come back to at the final question, which is around this business of emotional intelligence, and particularly for young people's access and usage and all that. I'm going to come back to that. You had a question, and yourself.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment about the code of ethics for mobile phones, or the lack of. I travel on public transport all the time, and I'm fed up listening to people, medical problems and all kinds of private stuff, and this is adults now, not young people. And also I've been nearly knocked down in the street by people texting and on their phone and all the time. That ties in with another thought I had earlier, and it's connected with Francine said, about we need to be talking to our young people that they don't have to be online all the time. They don't have to be walking on the street with the phone in their hand. They don't have to have all this. It brought me up short when my grandson, who was 14 at the time, said he couldn't live without his phone. And I just thought, well, I'm not going to answer to that because he thinks I'm a little boy anyway. So I think that not just in schools, but I think, among us adults with our children and grandchildren, and to try and get a conversation about communication, because although I agree with what you said there, because I live in Northern Ireland as well, but at the same time, we're losing the art of communication. I'm not on social media very often, and as Caroline is very good, she phones me up when things are happening, because I like this Moses. But sometimes I get paranoid and I feel left out, because I live on my own, and then I have to talk to myself and say this is ridiculous, But if you're a vulnerable young person, I can see how you would get into that.
And the fact that one of the most important things you said there, I think, is that Caroline phones you and she tells you what she thinks you might have missed, and I think that is something, again,
the connection that Goretta
yourself.
was talking about.
You had a question?
All right, I'd be remiss if I didn't get some advice from such an amazing panel. So I'm just sorry if this has come up when I was out, by the way, but the theme is kind of a double-edged sword, and it's quite apt. So it's like we've all seen the good and the bad of the internet, social media, etc. I'm just wondering, one of the things I find is that social media is great for sort of carving out a space that's safe, and that people can gather and create communities and things. But the internet is just very reflective of the real world in that you can carve out these spaces, but then the places that are supposed to be neutral really aren't actually neutral. They're not safe for women. They're not safe for especially women of color, things like that. So, but the internet, it is a great. You mentioned, Francine, I think that is a tool, and I think it is a very powerful tool. So I was just wondering if you had any, for organising and for getting people involved in things, and there's the temptation that they just click like and think that's it. But I just wonder if you had any advice on how best to use it, or not even just the internet, but just how best to sort of try and take back those, or take for the first time those spaces. Because I'm thinking, sometimes I kind of think, should we do what the trolls seem to be doing, and just sort of, I don't know, organise and land on a person who's particularly, maybe not say mean things to them, but just be quote numbers at them and quote statistics. This is why you're wrong. This is kind of right, type of thing. Or is there another way, a sort of more feminine way, if you know, or not feminine, but not as aggressive? I'm sorry if that made no sense.
Well, there was a couple of things there, actually. I'm fascinated by the concept. As I am as a community worker, I'm fascinated in general with this notion of the creation of safe space, right? Which I'm going to say it, and then I'll take the abuse coming in the real world. I think the concept of the creation of an absolutely safe space is an absurdity. I just don't think it can happen. It just doesn't happen, because we're flawed individuals. Even as much as you can try as a community worker in a real world space to create a situation where people can feel as free as they can be to communicate and to interact with each other and to share sometimes very personal things. The reality is that you have to make the choice to put it out there, because no space is absolutely safe. Now, and I've gotten to the point where I talk about that in workshop realities, because and again, and I hate to sort of go over the same space, you need to make a choice as to whether or not this is something you're going to share in this space, as flawed as it is. We can do our best to create as safe a space as we can, but we can never assure someone that it's an absolutely 100% safe space. Can't do it, and I think that's the case equally online. You can't absolutely guarantee a safe space. It is not a safe world. It is the truth of it, and we have to learn how to navigate our way through these things, and we need to teach our young people how to navigate through what very frequently feels a very unsafe reality, because frankly, it is. And that's just the truth of it. We have to begin to make our own decisions about how much we will communicate, what we wish to put out there. It is our decision to, we may need to engage as young people, but how do we engage? What is it that we, the choices that we can realize that we actually have the right to put out there, or not, as the case may be.